Hello, Amber. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good, good, good to connect with you. Let's get started by sharing a little bit with the audience about what you do.
Yeah, so I help women all over the world who are struggling with emotional eating, binge eating, and food addiction really get to the roots of why and how they're struggling with it. And I help them fully overcome it through doing deep mindset work, understanding triggers, understanding the emotional connections to gut and hormone issues and how that fuels the self-sabotage and working on balancing the hormones in the gut, and also dismantling the weight loss blocks and doing this all in a way that has no restriction, no insane workouts in the gym that you don't want to do. It's really addressing the roots and taking a gentle path to do this healing.
Ooh, okay, I'm gonna ask all the questions. This is gonna be really fun. Obviously, I see such a huge parallel. Like I have a whole program that's devoted to helping people take a break from alcohol and work on their emotional needs and recognize what emotional needs they're using alcohol for. And guess what? It's not just one; it's many. So there's just so many parallels here too. But before you got into this work, before I get into all the questions I'd love to ask you today, can you give me like a before? Like, what did you do before? Like, how did you get into this work? Why are you passionate about it?
Yeah, so I went through a deep struggle with food addiction, binging and purging, binge eating, emotional eating, like all the phases of self-sabotage with food that you could experience aside from anorexia, I went through. And I think for me, what really accumulated to these behaviors exploding in my face was growing up being bullied and called fat and ugly on the bus when I was 5, and just taking on that identity and not knowing confidence or self-love. Growing up in a home where I'm so grateful for my parents, but my mom hated her body and was overweight and had a food addiction and a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. So she would use food to compensate in our relationship for things she couldn't do, right? And there was always a wide array of junk foods and sugar and baked goods and chips and all of the things around the house. And there was never any like management of, okay, we only have this like on weekends, or you only have a little bit. Like I could eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. So I didn't know how food was impacting my mood, my hormones, my weight, my confidence, all of these things growing up. I just thought you eat what you eat and you either have good genes or crappy genes, good luck or bad luck. And it was as simple as that. And so that all accumulated into mindless, unconscious emotional eating, my whole upbringing. And then I think you throw in there getting exposed to Hollywood, the media, magazines, TV, music videos, the perfect Photoshop bodies. You start comparing yourself and going, what's wrong with me? I don't look like that, even though there's nothing wrong with us, right? It's the conditioning we've received. And then we start into the weight obsession. I don't look thin enough. My stomach isn't flat enough. I'm not getting the attention like these people are. So I better hop on the diet. And then you get conditioned with all the diet, weight loss, South Beach diet, the Atkins diet. I did like this eat salsa for 10 days diet. I only made it half a day, right? But there's this asphyxiation and obsession with weight loss and looking a certain way and not making us happy. And that's sold to us in the magazines and the media, right? So I latched onto all of that. And I just had this obsession with weight loss and having a flat stomach. And so that all led me to having a really deep experience into food addiction and a huge struggle with it when I had a breakup. I couldn't eat. I lost weight really fast. Then it was hard to maintain it. I wasn't happy, lost my cycle. All these things happened that were just making me miserable. And then I was like, well, what's the point? None of this is working. And then I just went into full-fledged binge eating. And so it wasn't just, I'm sad, I'm going to eat a half a chocolate bar. It was like eating like a full loss of control until I was sick. And then I purged for 6 months thinking, oh, well, purging is just going to prevent me from, gaining weight, even though it was so destructive. And it was the full lack of ownership of, taking responsibility for the self-sabotage I just put myself through. So I went from, my lowest unhealthy weight to gaining 80 pounds in 4 months, 70 to 80 pounds, and just completely feeling so much shame, so much embarrassment, hiding at home, not living my life, being a broke having a retail job, having no money, just so unhappy, so lonely, and just so deeply desiring to have this perfect body. And I really isolated for a few years as I went through these ups and downs, gaining and losing 20, 30, 40 pounds every few months. And it did a number on my hormones. It did a number on my digestive system, obviously did a number on my mental health. And for me, what really that low point moment, not that we want to have these, because what happens is you get into the state where you're afraid of change. You're afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of who am I going to be if I don't use food as a coping mechanism? Who am I going to be if I'm not obsessed with weight and losing weight? And so our mind, our ego talks us into like, oh, well, it's not that bad. And you get into this denial state where you're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But it was a huge deal. And so that was holding me back from changing. And my low point moment was a night where I had binged, and I was just really starting to get concerned because this was happening for a couple of years. And I thought, if I keep this up, I'm not sure I'm going to survive to 30. And I was only 21, 22 at the time because I was being so destructive on my body, either heavy restriction, diets, insane exercise, or full-fledged binge eating. It was one or the other. And so I would always throw the food in the garbage, thinking if I throw it in the garbage, I'm not going to dig through and eat it. And that night I thought, well, if this is the last time I'm going to do this, I might as well eat the rest. And so I dug through the garbage, ate the cookies, sat on the floor, just felt like the deepest level of shame, grief, embarrassment, like crying. Why am I doing this? But I needed that moment, because in that moment I thought, wow, this is significant. This is impacting every area of my life. It's impacting my health and my longevity of my life. Yes, I'm afraid. Yes, I don't know what the journey is going to look like, but I can't keep doing this. There's so much suffering that I am putting myself through. And that really catapulted me into wanting to start learning about food and how is food impacting my cravings, my blood sugar. Wow, sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine. Holy crap, I'm not crazy. Some of these foods are designed in a lab to give me a dopamine hit and make me crave and be addicted to them. And then I started to learn about, how gluten and dairy were impacting my gut health and my mood and my brain health. And then I realized, wow, okay, I'm eating less of these foods, but I still want to binge on like 10 bananas and a jar of peanut butter. And that's when I, learned the deep emotional void, this lack of self-love, this unworthiness, this, chasing everything outside of me to try and make me happy. And that I was using food to numb and suppress and check out. And so it was through this massive awareness of learning self-love, learning to gain awareness with my triggers. And I had many of them, learning, how to bring in self-care tools and tools to help me cope with my emotions and start to feel safe feeling, ditching the diets and the scale and that whole past programming picture, and really learning how to connect with my body and build awareness. That's really what helped me heal and fully heal all of it. And then started working on my gut health and hormone health, and started realizing, well, if I struggled with this the way that I did, how many other women, I know men struggle too, but how many women are in the same boat as me, whether it's just as intense, more intense, less intense, but don't have a way and don't have a path to go on. And so that's really, going through that really inspired me to start my business 10 years ago. And here we are 10 years later, and it's just been such a pleasure to support the women to healing.
Wow. Well, your story truly is remarkable. And I think that a lot of women can relate to parts of it or all of it, or however you said. And then there's so much that you've learned through the process of what you went through to now be able to help other people. So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of like just someone who has a ton of questions to be able to like understand how to move past this and understand everything better. You painted such a good picture. It's so nuanced, right? Like this is not just like one cause or one thing. It's not just the Hollywood standard. Like obviously there's the emotional traumas that we hold on to. How much, for you or your clients, would you say that like food became also a mechanism, like a tiny little microcosm of control? Like if you couldn't control the outside world or other things that were happening, but this you could, and how does that play into helping people change?
Yeah, that's huge. Control is a huge component of why we go to food. And I think it is because we feel so out of control in so many areas of our life and in the world. And we're not taught that we're not supposed to be in control of everything. And we lack trust in ourselves, our paths, why we're here, etc. We want control. And so I feel like with food, it's one of the easiest ways that, like our ego mindset, which is kind of the negative voice in the mind that convinces you, oh yeah, you're totally in control. You get to choose the food. You get to choose how much you want to have, right? You're in control, when really, in fact, we're also out of control with food. If we're losing control and binge eating and overeating, like we're not in control either way, but the ego convinces us that we are. And I feel like that, what I always say is what's below the control: fear, worry, anxiety, insecurity. What's below that? I'm not good enough. I don't feel worthy. I don't feel connected at all to myself. So I'm going to try and grasp onto all these external things and have control, whether it's food, the scale, the diet, right? The exercise plan. So we're trying to grip at control when really inside we feel completely out of control. And I think that as long as we try to gain control, we keep in this hamster wheel, because it's not about that. It's about learning what's below that. And okay, yeah, I need to deal with that. But it's we're sold all these quick fixes that scream control, right?
Yeah. It's almost like a game that like your ego gets to play instead of getting to like the deeper issues and keep you
Yeah.
busy doing,
Yes.
counting or
Yeah.
whatever it looks like. So like when it comes to obviously the food world, there's like really huge extremes and there's this like, yes, we all should be skinny and healthy and live a long time and eat these foods and don't eat those foods. And then there's the like but the opposite, spectrum of like full body positivity, like total food freedom, like, love yourself no matter what. And like you can see positives like to both sides, right? Like obviously we want to be healthy, we want to
Mhm.
live long lives, we want to eat foods that nourish our body and don't cause us detriment. But then at the same time, like we've been sold this like hyper like you said, photoshopped image of what a woman looks like and, like completely dysmorphed what it means to
Mhm.
look healthy and have this, insane validation on body size. And so the body positivity side also shares so much about really the self-love and stuff. How do you blend those two in your work so that like health isn't like, because you were talking about the gut and like how different foods affect us. Like obviously I can see from your work that health is still a huge cornerstone of the work you do. But how do you kind of take those two kind of opposing spectrums and put them together in an approach that works for someone?
Yeah. So I think the key is always coming back to people want to feel better. They want to have a better quality of life. They want to have longevity in their life. And so we have to look at the health. And so to me, it's about building this healthy relationship with your body and food. And part of that is, okay, well, let's look at your symptoms. Let's look at what's fueling your symptoms. Let's look at how the self-sabotage with food is amplifying all of that and why healing that is actually going to really help alleviate a lot of what you're struggling with. So health has many different meanings. It's not, to me, it's not a number on the scale. A lot of our set points are natural set points. Like our body's weight will go to what is natural as we heal without us having to diet, restrict, exercise. That happened to me. And it happens to my clients all the time. But to me, health is really looking at like optimal energy, balanced gut, balanced hormones, being free of cravings, your PMS and menopause symptoms going away. It's your mental health. It's feeling at ease and peace with food and not feeling the guilt after you have, a piece of cake or some ice cream. It is desiring to want to take care of yourself and your body because this is the divine vessel that you have to live this life in. And without your quality of health, your quality of life is largely, right, like minimized. And so to me, that's really important. Then we bring in the body positivity, because this is really important to me, that it's very important we learn to love ourselves. And learning to love ourselves doesn't mean the body can't change and the weight doesn't come off. In fact, I find the more we love ourselves, the healthier we feel, the more aligned our emotional, mental, energetic health, the more connected we are to our bodies. The body heals. The body's always trying to heal. It's just that we get in the way with all of this distraction and control and self-sabotage. So to me, we want to learn self-love, and the body will shift as you learn to love her. Now, where I have a bit of a with the body positivity movement is, yes, learn to love yourself at any size. However, to me, if you're constantly gaining weight, and it's making your blood pressure go up, it's giving you increased chances of autoimmune and diabetes, you're, at high risk for all kinds of things, there is a health factor to me that I think is important for us to look at. I don't think that just going, oh, this is it. And like, I don't know. I wouldn't settle for not looking at the risk of like just being extremely overweight and what that does. Like, as when I gained 80 pounds, I was like, there was so many risks that I had increased and I didn't want to play that game. Right. So each person is on their own path with deciding what they want to do with their health and their body. It's completely up to them. But I don't think we should be pushed to like, just love yourself. It's okay if like you have all these high risks, don't look at it. Be willing to look at it. The body only hangs on to weight when she doesn't feel safe. And there's many physical, emotional, and energetic contributors to that, as well as our traumas and our past history. So to me, I like to say, hey, like, I'm not going to make you lose weight. Let's explore weight as a protective mechanism. And ideally, why are you hanging on? And instead of a weight loss journey, we focus on that. And as they heal their relationship with food, they balance their hormones and their gut health. Like, people want to feel better, right? As that occurs, they're not focusing on weight loss, but it just comes off and like, oh my gosh, my clothes are fitting looser. Oh my gosh, it's shifting, and I didn't have, wow, like I didn't have to do any of the things that the outside world is telling me. This is amazing. This is to me like the ultimate, right? But that we don't need to lose weight to love ourselves. But ideally, like if you want to live a longer life, be willing to deal with whatever the protection is so that you can give yourself that. Like I'm an advocate for that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important.
I love your approach. I love how nuanced it is, and really understanding like those risk factors. Like, and we do, like, there's this inner desire for all of us to want to live, you know what I mean? And that's
Yes.
something that needs to be really honored. I do believe, and doing it, like you said, in a gentle and almost redefining what health really means, you know, from an image to like a feeling to a self-love, like you talk about. I think that's great. I remember, like, for me personally, I grew up quite on the smaller side, perhaps, you know, and then I go to college and alcohol, food, junk food, like, and I
Mm-hmm.
just explode, right? And everyone in my life notices. So then I start getting, you know, it talked about, and that's like when it started, you know, the endless diet, the endless exercise
Mm-hmm.
plan. And I was on that for at least like a decade, you know. And for me, healing my relationship with alcohol was actually the kicker to really change that as well. And I kind of, like you said, naturally kind of lost some weight. And ever since then, like 5 years now, like my personal development, my self-love, my internal landscape, just how I talk to myself, it's changed so much. And it's still like in progress, obviously, but I've just noticed like the way I approach food is really different too, even though like I didn't have like a big, you know, maybe rock bottom moment with food, but I noticed like too, like the more secure I am, the more I like just like I'm feeling into myself and my business and my life, like the less I'm using food as something other than just nourishing me, if that makes sense.
Oh,
Because I still have those
100%.
moments where I'm like, I had a hard day, you know, I need like a really good meal. And I can tell there might not be something so wrong in that, but like there's still that emotional need I'm using
Yeah.
food for. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That chasing that dopamine hit. I need one of those.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. So tell us a little bit about, like, you talked about different foods, how they change our craving levels, our digestive systems, our gut. Like, what are some of those practical strategies that people can use so they're not like on a never-ending hamster wheel?
Yeah. So I think part of it is to become attuned to what you eat and how it makes you feel. And I think this is where we need to slow down with our food and slow down with chewing properly and, you know, having that eating good digestion so we can start to go, okay, was I bloated before I ate, or did I get bloated because there's something in this meal? Or does it have nothing to do with my food? But it's like I'm stressed to the nines, my nervous system's overwhelmed, my cortisol, which is my stress hormone, is through the roof. And everything I eat is making me bloated because I need to deal with that. Right. So there's these two different stems. The emotional state amplifies the gut issues and the reaction. And then there's the actual foods. And then the last thing is the perception of the food. So if I look at a carrot and I go, this carrot is bad, this carrot is going to make me gain weight, I'm already going into a stress response. I'm not going to break it down, digest, and absorb the nutrients. Versus if I look at this beautiful cupcake or this beautiful, I don't know, whatever your favorite indulgence is, and I go, you know what? I trust my body. I feel relaxed. I'm so excited to enjoy this and savor it and like have this blissful experience. I chew it thoroughly. I enjoy it. I'm present. And then once I'm complete, I can move on and there's no guilt. There's no fear. There's no nothing. I'm going to break that down so much better than if I'm in guilt and shame and judgment and this is bad and I shouldn't be eating this. So that's the first piece, is be aware of your perception and thoughts of the food and be aware of what state you're in before you eat, because that is going to have a big impact on the way you break down and digest. I think as far as specific foods, you know, I find that a lot of people, they get into eating like the refined sugars, the fast foods, the foods that have a lot of MSG and ingredients that do excite the same part of the brain as a hard drug. And so part of it is to be aware of when you eat these things, do you feel all of a sudden you want to have a complete loss of control? Do you lose control and eat until you're so full that you're sick? Or do you notice you eat it and get a bit of bloating or nothing happens? I think that awareness is also important, because it's not necessarily about, oh, yeah, for me, sugar was 10 times more addictive than cocaine. So I didn't just go, I can't eat any sugar ever again. I said, well, why don't I try things like honey and coconut sugar and more natural options? Because I'm not going to deny myself, but I also feel like if I keep doing this, I'm going to keep losing control. So we sometimes start to add in alternatives that are better for, you know, lowering inflammation, not going to give us a massive dopamine hit. that are going to make our recipes taste amazing. So there's a lot of avenues to take with this, depending on the severity of the person's addiction, binge behaviors, or emotional eating, right? It's like with alcohol, like I mean, there's so many ways probably to approach it, but like, you don't part-time drink if you have a serious alcohol addiction, right? It's like, you don't go, I'm going to have just wine and beer, but I'm going to cut out the rest. Like if you have a serious sugar addiction, it's really hard to just have a mindful amount until you address the addiction and you address the emotional fuelers, you address your blood sugar issues, you address high cortisol, gut flora issues, all these things that are like making it so easy for you to give into it, right? So it really depends on the severity. And I guess one of the easiest things you can do is just start making small changes in the kitchen with your food to improve the quality of your food. So if you're eating a lot of processed items, and I hope I'm answering your question, I feel like this one's so like, there's so many responses to this, because there's no right or wrong way to eat. It really depends on the severity of your addiction or your self-sabotage with food. But to me, it's like, bring more natural ingredients into the kitchen, start trying new vegetables, try new proteins, try new fats, try new, fruits and things like that. And as you do so, and you actually get your hands on your food, it makes it so much easier to make more mindful choices. And the more good food we have available, the less likely we are to be like, F it, I'm going to go and buy whatever and eat whatever because I'm not prepared. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there's so many like ways to approach food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just like a powerful mindset to have and to know too, that like you're not locked into a specific craving cycle or a specific like mode of operating in your digestive system. There's just so much like stones unturned, that we can still
Yes.
continue to address. And just giving that guidance as well is super helpful. So with the emotional part, like you obviously started your story back to your childhood, and so many of us, who doesn't have a hard childhood, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it's emotional neglect or, traumas or however it is when we're growing up, we carry that onto ourselves as adults. We grow up with low self-worth, like, inner critics, all that kind of stuff. So it's so interesting that someone could come to you for emotional eating and just come for a whole life transformation as you're healing really, really deep wounds.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on healing those wounds? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think it's so important to address that, because it is one of the things that is continuing to amplify this behavior. And so I love to address a couple things. Number one is that hurt inner child, no matter the age, whether it was you at 5 or you a week ago, that is upset because she got ignored. She observed her mom tracking her weight multiple times a day and thought that that's just a normal thing that you did. She got put on a diet at 6. Someone poked at her stomach and made fun of her. So I think it's so important for us to start to become aware of those monumental moments in time, or something that seemed insignificant at the time, but you really are hanging on to, and go in and talk to that part of us. And you get to mend that relationship with your inner child through reassurance, through letting her just express herself and loving her and supporting her. And as you start to like let go of the resistance against yourself that you're holding against yourself, it does get easier to go in and mend the relationship with her. And you release a lot of emotion, right? And that helps us let go of the past. And that also helps release the protection. I find as I get into inner child work with my clients, that shifts a lot because the nervous system is hanging on, the body's hanging all on to all of these past emotions, right? Because we've been suppressing it all down. So that's really important. I love using EFT tapping. Emotional freedom technique is so great for clearing stuff out of the cells in the body. I love doing mind mapping, where what we're doing is in a session, like taking some time to really dissect a negative thought or a limiting belief or a memory from the past. Okay, well, what triggers you to go into this thought, belief, or memory? What age were you when this first happened? Once you're in that and you've given your power away to what are the thoughts and emotions you're feeling, and then how do you behave with your body, with food? How do you show up in your life? And how does that all amplify your symptoms and, make you feel worse and drain your energy, etc.? Because awareness is the key. The more aware we are of what triggers us to give our power away and then go into self-sabotage and where that came from, the more we can catch it in the moment and go, oh, okay, I have a choice point. I can either completely spiral and give my power away and repeat the pattern, or I can recognize that, yes, it might feel difficult to catch it and actually like breathe through it, but I'm actually going to start using my tools and take these little steps to go, it's safe for me to feel. Numbing with food is not going to do anything. this is how I'm feeling. This is actually what I really need instead, to talk to my inner child, to breathe, to get out for a walk, to like just sit and journal. And as you do that and you start breaking this pattern and stepping more into your power, the confidence you build is huge. The excitement you have around, wow, oh my gosh, I can actually do this, is huge. So those are some of my favorite ways to work on releasing that past, memory, trauma, whatever you want to call it, and leave it in the past, forgive it, let it go.
Yeah. I love the inner child work that you talk about. And even the specific kind of examples you gave, like, I don't know about you, but when I would look at myself, I almost felt like there was like this barometer of how much trauma or pain or situations you had to go through in order to say that you had a hard childhood, right? So like all those little examples of getting hurt or having someone make fun of you or having like, no, those don't qualify. Like unless you went through, parent abandonment, unless like you were, just horribly victimized, unless you went through a war, like that doesn't all count. And so I think it's almost even coming back to that little girl and was like, no, that was hard. That
Mhm.
was painful experience. That was, even though in hindsight, maybe just an offhand comment or an offhand day or whatever, it really did wound that inner child within you. And having like so much more compassion for like her experience of it and
Yeah.
really recognizing it was a big deal. Like at that point, with the tools I had, with the understanding I had at the world, that broke so much trust in me. It was
Mhm.
a big deal. I do deserve to heal that.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like that's been really important because it's always been this kind of like, oh, I don't like, I haven't had it as bad as like some of those other people type of a thing, that
Right.
I don't even honor the work that needs to be done to heal the inner child. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Imagine you have a client who is literally like, Amanda, I'm just hungry. Like, I don't relate to anything else you're saying. I know there's probably stuff I need to clear, but like none of that comes up. It's not about control from, I'm just freaking hungry. I just like want to eat food. Like, where would you go from there?
Yeah. So we'd look at a few things. Number one, we would look at, are you eating enough? Are you eating enough protein and fat with your beautiful meals to regulate your blood sugar? Is there some kind of hormone imbalance going on that is throwing your appetite levels way off through the roof? Do you have a gut flora imbalance that tends to make people a lot more hungry because certain foods feed that unhealthy bacteria? And then we go back to the emotional and go, okay, are you always feeling hungry because you're never present with food? Are you mindlessly eating and on the run all the time so you're not emotionally satiated and physically satiated, right? Are we sure that there's nothing there? Let's really dig deeper. Let's explore, like, are any of these other triggers going on for you? Because there's always something there. Do you have a blood sugar issue, right? So we would really dissect and dismantle the emotional and look deeper into the physical to rule out any imbalances there. And usually at that point, we can beautifully regulate the appetite levels, cravings completely go away, and our hunger cues get dialed in because we produce ghrelin to make us hungry and we produce leptin to make us full. And I often see these skewed when we have hormone imbalances, gut imbalances, high stress, mindless eating, and this void going on. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So this isn't like a perfect day in the life or anything like that, but I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite foods or like just like a normal general day of eating for you? Again, there's no standard here. Everyone can eat what they want, but I'd love to just
Totally.
know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm in a smoothie kick. I freaking love smoothies. Of course, I love to add my avocado. Little hack, it makes it nice and creamy and thick if you like it like that. Bananas and cherries and strawberries. Sometimes I add greens, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what I'm feeling, but the fat and the protein is important. I'm a huge carnivore. I need protein. I did horribly on the vegan diet. It fueled my binge eating and bloating issues. I know some people thrive off of plant-based, but I need my animal protein. So I absolutely love that. Favorite meal is turkey dinner, 100%. I love getting in the kitchen for the few hours and like prepping it all. It's so fulfilling to serve it and have everyone enjoy it. And I love baking. So I love doing like my loaves and my pies and it, when I sit and I enjoy it now, I think back to when I would just eat the whole thing and I'm like, I'm so grateful that I can just sit and enjoy this. And I'm so detached, right? You get to celebrate the progress. So that's food. I love food. We should love food. Food is supposed to be a joyous experience, and healing will help us have that experience.
Well, so much wisdom. I love learning from you today, Amber. Tell us, where can listeners find more about you, follow you, all the good stuff?
Yeah, so you can check out my website at amberapproved.ca. I have a free emotional eating quiz there if you're wondering if you're struggling, if you're wanting to connect to have a further conversation, you can book a body freedom session to do so. The podcast, which I'm so excited to have you on as well, is called the No Sugarcoating Podcast, and all the episodes are available on the website or any app. And then you can find me on Instagram, and it's my name, Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include all of that in the show links below. Amber, thank you so much for dropping so much wisdom today. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for having me.